Hi everyone. A question that I'm often asked by parents and teachers is, how do we help children to remember information they are taught? How do we help them to remember something that they seem to grasp when they're working individually with an adult? And how do we help them to apply it into different situations and to retain their knowledge in different contexts? Today I'm going to give you tips for how you can support children to use their memory skills and to help them really consolidate information that they're learning. My first tip is to use multisensory teaching approaches. This means using different activities and teaching through different methods that help the child use their different senses to process and make sense of information they're learning about. So, for example, whilst we're talking to a child about a particular concept or explaining something to them, we also need to think about how we can activate their other senses to help them take in and process and really consolidate the information they're learning. So, for example, you might want to think about using images to help them use their visual processing. This could be diagrams or graphs or pictures. Then we can think about tactile information we can touch, particularly for something like maths. Being able to hold objects is really, really important to help the mathematical concepts that can be quite abstract become more concrete and meaningful for a child. And for literacy, we can think about using tactile information to help a child recognise and remember letter patterns in words and how to form letters with their handwriting. So this is where arts and crafts really comes in handy. And if you have a creative child, it's a really great way to inspire and engage them when you're working with them. Use lots of different tactile materials, from paint to collage to sand, even food like honey. It's really great for children to get their hands on, feel the movement of letters whilst they're tracing through the honey with their fingers, create different textures by sticking collage materials onto letters so that they can really start to feel what a letter looks like. So it's not just about what they're seeing with their eyes, but they're actually feeling the shapes of the letters as well. And when we're thinking about learning words, particularly those tricky words that we have to learn by sight, we have to learn them as a whole word, then using colours and patterns and drawing little images alongside those words can really help. We can also think about using movement to help children when they're memorising information. Children learn best when they're having fun, and children love to move, and they physically need to move for their development. So if we can have them even marching around the room, perhaps clapping a rhythm or beating a drum to a rhythm. If you're lucky enough to have a trampoline, can they jump on a trampoline? All whilst they're trying to memorise facts, whether it's spellings for the week or perhaps you're learning times tables or number bonds. Whilst we want children to really understand the concepts underneath these literacy and math skills, there is also still a place for being able to memorise and recall information automatically. And by using movement and all our senses, we can help the child to integrate that information and make stronger connections in their brain. We can also think about sound and smell as well. Does the child respond really well to music and to rhythm? And do they find it easier to learn information if they're singing along, or even if there's just classical music playing in the background? You can try lots of different things and see what works. Also, if we're going to really think about all the senses, then is there a way that you can incorporate sense of smell into a situation? Perhaps you're going to spray different scents onto words, and that might help the child to make a strong connection in their brain, and they might recall that learning experience in the future more easily if it's associated with a particular smell. My second tip is to practice little and often. So whilst you might be teaching your child a particular concept, we know that children learn most effectively when they have the opportunity to practice a few times a day in short bursts. This is going to be more effective than trying to encourage them to work for an hour every day. So what we want to do is we want to give them lots of opportunities, both at home and at school, to revisit, to make sure they really understand what we're teaching them, and then to practice it in short bursts with lots of adult modelling, lots of encouragement, and lots of support and reassurance to know that it's okay if you don't get it straight away. We can keep practicing, we can keep going over it until you've really, really grasped it. And this is really important as well for ensuring that children are then able to transfer information in the long term into different contexts, rather than just learning it in a single point of time where they might seem to have understood, they might seem to have remembered it, but actually later on it disappears. By doing that little and often approach, we're really helping them to strengthen those links in their brain, to help them to really store that information in their long-term memory. My next tip is to do something called scaffolding. This is where we think about the difference between what a child can do by themselves and what they can achieve with adult support, because often children will be able to remember information better if they have an adult supporting them in helping them to not just recall it, but actually in how they're learning it in the first place. So what we can do is we can think of 3 key words here: watch, together, try. When you're working with a child, first of all, encourage them just to watch what you're doing. It removes all that pressure that they may feel, oh my goodness, I'm going to have to remember something and I really don't quite understand it, or I'm worried I might get it wrong. If all they have to do is watch to start with, then that can really help reduce that anxiety and remove those emotional barriers that are often present and hinder the child's ability to store information in their memory in the first place. Then you encourage the child to join in with you together. So again, we're removing those emotional barriers. We're working with the child so they know that they're not doing it on their own. Whatever it is you're teaching, whether you're teaching them a particular concept in class or whether you're supporting a child doing their home learning, encourage them to join in with you as much as they feel they're able to. Again, it's really unpressured. A child will still learn by watching and doing an activity with you. They don't have to do it all by themselves to be able to learn it effectively. The final part, try, is really only to be used once you feel the child is showing signs that they might be confident to have a go themselves. If they're not ready, then stick with that watch together cycle. When they're starting to show signs that they might have grasped a concept, then encourage them to have a try. Give lots and lots of praise and reassurance, even if they haven't quite got it yet. We want to really boost that confidence. And if they then sort of retreat a bit and they're then a bit more unsure and they don't want to keep going, that's okay. We can go back to the together. Let's do this concept. Let's do this activity and learn about this concept together again. And then we can see maybe about trying again a little bit later. Another strategy you can use is to think about starting learning activities really, really easy. We often focus on the next steps for a child and what we're trying to help them achieve and understand. But if we start with an activity that we know and that the child knows they are confident in completing, then we're starting off in a really positive experience and the brain is getting engaged in that ready to learn mode without the fear or worry of making a mistake or feeling overwhelmed with the learning task. Then we can gradually build up with those challenges and with introducing those new concepts. So, for example, if you're giving a child a worksheet to do at school, start with a task that you know they absolutely can do and they have done lots and lots of times before that they feel really confident in. And it only has to be 1 or 2 parts of the sheet or the activity, but try to start really, really easy. And if you're doing home learning with your child at home, then it's okay to adapt the home learning and maybe take it back a few steps, or you could ask your child's teacher for some ideas of how you could start off the home learning task a little bit easier, just to gradually work your way up to actually working on the task that they're doing. If your child's school or the school that you're working in use approaches such as setting tasks at different levels, so for example mild, medium or hot, always ensure that the mild includes elements that are even easier than the mild. We really want a child to start off a learning task feeling that actually, yeah, this is something that I can do. I can definitely do some of this. And it's going to help with their motivation and engagement as well. Something else that's really important that is often overlooked in terms of educating children is how are we teaching them what memory skills are and how to use their memory? How are we supporting a child to really be able to make sense of and understand the way they learn and what helps them remember information the best? How aware are they of their own thinking processes and their own brain and their own memory skills? Does a child learn best visually? Do they learn best through movement or listening to music? All those sensory aspects that we talked about earlier. And you don't have to be an expert to help a child to improve their memory skills and think about different memory techniques. One of the best ways to do this is by playing games that involve using the memory. Whether this is card games such as Snap or Pairs, or some talking games such as the shopping basket game. And I will put some links down below to where you can find information about memory games and activities. But basically anything that involves a child having to think about information that they are looking at or listening to, and then be able to recall that information, that's going to really, really help them develop and strengthen their memory skills. We can also think about rhythm and music. So learning nursery rhymes is really fantastic for young children in developing their memory skills, and thinking about clapping rhythms. Can a child repeat a rhythm back? Can we gradually lengthen it and extend it? Can they remember the lyrics to a pop song and enjoy dancing along and singing along to it? All these different activities involve elements of memory, and if we can tap into what works best for the child and help them to become aware of it, then they can start to be more reflective and use those approaches when they're trying to memorize information. So if you have a child who is fantastic at dancing, then they're going to memorize their spellings and number bonds much easier if they're dancing and moving around. If your child has a real ear for music and a strong sense of rhythm, then use those approaches. If your child is very active, then don't have them sat down at a desk when you're trying to help them memorize information. Go for a walk, talk about it. Climbing and jumping and cycling, anything that involves movement whilst you're thinking about learning some key facts can all help. And then if we are working with information where we're having to understand a concept, it's not just about learning a fact, we're having to really understand a concept and trying to make sense of something, then thinking about what's going to help the child to access and store information in their memory. They're going to need to see information, they're going to need to talk about it, they're going to need to really grab hold of any concrete objects you can provide to support them in what they're trying to learn about, so that we can make the learning experience come to life, make it more real, because things that stand out to us in our daily experiences are the things that we're going to remember the best. The final tip is to think about prompting. When we talk about prompts, these are little clues that we give to a child to help them recall information that they're trying to think of in their mind. There are all sorts of different prompts that you can use, and there's no set rule or way of doing something. You might, for example, give attention prompts where you want to help a child refocus their attention. This might be just a tap on the shoulder. It could be that you just point at the activity just to draw your child's focus to it. You might have some pre-planned, pre-agreed prompts of a child that you're working with, that they know that if you say a particular word or show a particular symbol or picture, it means that they need to think back to the task that they're doing and their mind's wandering a little bit. There are also prompts we can use to help a child recall information from their memory. Sometimes these prompts are verbal. So for example, if they're thinking about how to spell a word or sound it out, or they're trying to recall a fact, a historical fact, you might give the first sound of the word. If they're trying to remember how to spell the word picnic and they've got to pick and then they're getting a bit lost or muddled, you could just give a prompt of saying and see if they can work out and remember what comes next. It might be that you're thinking about particular letter patterns, so you might give a choice of prompts. Choices are really great prompts to use because the child feels supportive, but at the same time you're actively engaging their thinking and their memory skills, so that they can try to come up with the answer using the knowledge and information that they have learnt. So for example, if you were working on teaching a child how to spell the word boat and they couldn't quite remember which letters to use, you might show them or say to them the different letters that make the O sound. So you might say O and E or O and A, and that choice of options might be enough just to prompt them to sort of say, oh yes, I remember we did those patterns, we did that at school, or we practiced that the other week. I remember that's the right sound to use. We can use visual prompts as well. So for maths, using lots of pictures and diagrams is a really great way to help children to recall the different methods that they need to use when they're problem solving and doing calculations. So there's all sorts of different ways you can prompt a child. It's basically about giving them a little clue before you give them the full answer. But don't wait too long before helping a child if they are struggling. If the prompt helps, great. If it doesn't work after a few moments, don't pursue it too much because we don't want the child to become stressed. It's still okay to give them the answer and work through the thinking, work through the activity with them, explaining, doing the activities together. They will still learn and remember if they are learning with an adult. They don't have to do it on their own. I hope you found this video helpful and it's given you some strategies you can use to support the child that you're working with, to help them consolidate, to make sense of information, to really get to grips with it and store it in their long-term memory so that they're better able to recall it and apply it in different contexts.